Have you ever wondered how much American homes cost in the past compared to today? In this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the history of American home prices, from the 1940s all the way up to the present day. We'll explore how prices have fluctuated over the decades, influenced by various economic factors and events. We've got a wealth of data at our fingertips, meticulously documented by the Census and the Federal Reserve Economic Data, or FRED. We'll also compare what life was like 50 years ago in America to life today in 2024. But we're not stopping there. We'll also look at the average cost of homes in the decade you were born. So buckle up as we take a trip down memory lane to explore the fluctuating prices of American homes over the past 80 years. Imagine it's the 1940s. The average cost of a home stands at a mere $2,938. Picture a time when the simplicity of life mirrored the simplicity of home prices. A time when owning a home was within reach for many Americans. However, when we adjust this figure for inflation to reflect the value in 2024, that average price tag balloons to $64,372.84. That's right, what once cost less than $3,000 in the 1940s would now set you back over $64,000 in today's market. A stark reminder of how inflation has changed our economy over the decades, but hold on to your hats, because as we move forward in time, these numbers start to climb even higher. Today's prices are a staggering 21.91 times higher than the average price 80 years ago. Now, let's fast forward to the 1950s, a decade that saw the dawn of rock and roll, the beginning of the civil rights movement, and a significant jump in home prices. Fast forward to the 1950s, the average cost of a home jumps to $7,354. Quite a leap from a decade ago, isn't it? This was a time of post-war boom. The economy was on an upswing, and so was the housing market. But let's not get carried away by the seemingly small number. When we adjust this figure for inflation, it equals a whopping $93,602 in 2024. Yes, you heard that right. It's fascinating, isn't it, to look back at how the housing market has evolved? To think that what we consider a small amount now was quite a large sum back then. It makes one wonder about the true value of money. But let's not get lost in thought. The 1950s were indeed a time of change, a time of growth. The housing market was no exception. It mirrored the overall economic prosperity of the era. But as we all know, change is the only constant. Housing prices in 2024 have increased 12.73 times since 1950. Let's see what the 1960s have in store. The 1960s brought significant growth, with homes finally surpassing the $10,000 mark. In 1960, the average cost of a home in the United States was $11,900. It may seem like a distant memory now, but when we adjust this for inflation, it equates to around $123,320.18 in today's market. The upward trend continued throughout the decade. By 1963, the average cost of a home had risen to $19,300. In today's market, that's just over $193,470.52. And by the end of the 1960s, the average American home was costing $27,000. That's equivalent to a staggering $213,457.27 in 2024, adjusted for inflation. The cost of homes has seen a dramatic increase over the years. Let's move on to the 1970s. In the 1970s, the average home price saw an overall increase of nearly $50,000. It was a decade that witnessed a dramatic surge in the housing market. The beginning of the decade started with an average home price of $27,000. By the end of the 1970s, this figure had soared to $74,200. Just imagine that leap. When you adjust these figures for inflation to today's dollars, the picture becomes even more striking. The $27,000 at the beginning of the 1970s equates to $213,457.27 in 2024. By the end of the decade, the $74,200 would be equivalent to a staggering $313,506.24. The 1970s marked a significant increase in home prices. Let's see how the 1980s compare. The 1980s brought one of the biggest surges in home prices. This was a decade that saw the average cost of a house in the United States rise dramatically. At the start of the 1980s, the typical home price was $72,200. But when you adjust that to today's figures, taking into account inflation, it's the equivalent of over $305,000. But the real shocker comes when we look at the jump that happened in just 4 years, from 1984 to 1988. In this short period, the average price of a home in the US increased by a staggering $43,000. When we translate that to 2024, the figure is downright jaw-dropping. The 1980s were a time of economic expansion, but also a period of rising costs, particularly in the housing market. This rapid increase was a harbinger of the further escalations that would come in the following decades, leading us to the current state of the housing market. The 1980s saw a significant increase in home prices. Let's move to the present day. Fast forward to 2024, and the cost of homes has skyrocketed. The average price of a home now towers at a staggering 21 times higher than it was 80 years ago. Back in the 40s, the average cost of a home was a modest $2,938. In today's market, that's just over $64,000. Quite a contrast to the current average home price, which sits comfortably in the six figures. It's clear that the landscape of the housing market has undergone significant transformation over the years. The post-war boom, inflation, economic fluctuations, and changes in monetary policies have all played a part in shaping the market we see today. With the Federal Reserve's tightening monetary policy and the increasing mortgage rates, buying a home has become more expensive. The housing market has cooled down, with price growth slowing down significantly. Despite these challenges, homes remain a crucial part of the American dream. They are not just buildings, but places where memories are created, families grow, and lives are lived. The cost of American homes has dramatically increased over the past 80 years. This journey through time gives us a clearer picture of the ever-changing housing market.